Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm Philippe Dumas from EJEG. I see a lot of friends. Many of you are self-muted, but feel free to speak whenever you want. Sandeep, you can hear us? Sandeep. So you can see here the agenda, but we are about to start in 2 to 3 minutes when we have more people. We have more than 20 people connected about to join. So.
Hi, Philippe. Valerie, I just logged in and out again. I think I'm in now on the right setting.
Okay, we can hear you, and we started. Huh?
Oh, okay. Oops.
No, we don't start officially, but just we open the floor to discuss with members.
Oh, okay, that's good.
One thing in terms of organizing, can I ask all of you, if you want to speak, but you see that by mistake you're muted by the organizer, please raise your hand and we will unmute you and give you the possibility to speak, okay? What time is it? Oh, we still have 2 minutes. Yeah.
Hello, you hear me fine?
Yes, hello, Thomas. So just for information, so I'm from Belgium side. So Philippe, I'm there. We have Sanjeev, our head of policy, and Thomas, our senior policy officer, and Valeria, our head of communication. Maybe one formal question, Sanjeev. So some of our members have a presentation to deliver. Did we receive it, or they will show from their screen?
Nothing has been received, so I think it's best if we just share the screens with them.
Okay, yeah, it seems better maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Pity, we just received an apologize from Sarah Montomini from Enel Green Power. She has a small health issue, so she cannot join. But I see we have some Italians with us.
Philip, can you listen to me?
Yes, I can hear you, Andre.
Ah, hello.
Hello.
I also prepared a short presentation. Should I send it to you, or what do you think?
No, if you send to us, it will be good maybe to after forward to the members. But if it's more convenient for you, as you're familiar also with GoToWebinar and GoToMeeting, we'll make you presenter and you can show from your screen.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so in terms of practice, so indeed you are all unmuted normally, so you have to self-mute yourself to not disturb when there's a presentation. So as you see, there's I don't know, Sanjeev, we have 30 minutes presentation, and after it's more discussion.
Maybe I can start now. Is that?
Yeah, maybe you can start slowly. We still have
Yeah.
people about to connect, but you can start slowly. Yeah.
Okay, of course. Well, whilst we'll give it a few more minutes, and then we can start off.
And maybe also in terms of logistics, you're normally quite familiar with this tool, GoToWebinar, but have in mind you have different possibilities. Of course, you can open your mic and speak orally. If there's a presentation and you want to have a comment after a presentation, the best is you raise your hand and we will open your mic just after the presentation. You can also raise a question in the question section, and you can also have a chat with different people with the chat. So you have all these different options. Yeah, we have 25 people connected in total. How many are we expecting?
Normally 34.
34. Okay, but maybe there's some last minute delays. As it's quite a tour busy, maybe you can start slowly presenting the concept, Sanjeev.
Yes, of course. I think I've just realised I've logged in incorrectly again, because I don't know how to share my screen. If you can give me that chance. What do I do? Oh, there we go. Voila. Okay, cool. Thank you, everybody. I hope you can see my screen now. Firstly, good morning, and welcome, and thank you for agreeing to take part in this, the first step in a very important journey that we're going to embark upon together. The objective of our conversation for the next 2 hours, and hopefully for the next months and years to come, is to put geothermal firmly on the political radar. So the purpose of this conversation, the purpose of the activities that we're going to undertake, is to engineer a political conversation, because that's missing at the moment around geothermal. So what we hear is there are many governments, politicians, companies, regional governments, local governments, who kind of position themselves as champions of renewable energy and the kind of the energy transition and the climate crisis, but few of them actually mention or put geothermal front and center. And really the purpose of our activities is to work through together to identify how we can make geothermal the number one or in the top 3 priorities of anyone who's talking about energy transition, climate, or renewable energy. Part of that is to create a mainstream conversation around geothermal energy, its contribution towards renewable heating, towards renewable electricity, transport, agriculture, industrial decarbonisation, but also an industrial story as well. So what we envisage is an activity that's coordinated with the Secretariat, with members from individual companies to associations to large multinationals, academia, a whole host of people, all at the same time saying the same coordinated messages, engaging in political conversations and effectively moving the needle in whichever sphere they operate. And the plan is, or the idea is that this is something that will take us time, but we should start to see the results of this very, very quickly, and hope within a window of like between 3 to 5 years that we actually have meaningful regulatory drivers, financial instruments, and whatever capacity is needed to drive the different types of geothermal forward. So that's the purpose of the conversation today. So there's no one activity that's going to win everything, but the objective is that working in unison, building up momentum, increasing the volume over time will allow us to put geothermal front and center of the mainstream discourse on energy transition, and effectively it becomes the guiding approach to how we as EDGEC organise ourselves in terms of the advocacy that we do, the strategic communications, and all forms of policy design that are associated with moving at a European level, at a national level, and wherever possible, regional clusters as well. So the geothermal strategy, it's important to know that it's a process. So it's not one product or one activity, it's a series of activities pushing in the right direction. But the objective is to build political momentum, and that we have to influence all of the legislative frameworks. So it's not just having a European initiative, it's not just having an initiative in one of the member countries, but it's actually making sure that everybody's pushing in the right way so that we tap into the potential of geothermal everywhere. So this is from deep geothermal to shallow geothermal to the lithium deposits to the food and beverages and agricultural aspects. Everything is moving in the same direction at the same time. That's the pace, that's the momentum, that's what we want from this activity. Now, what we've defined at the moment are 4 stepping stones to get to where we want to be, to realising the geothermal decade. The first step, and we're going to go through this in a lot more detail later on today, the first step is to focus on a piece of individual research, which allows us to bring in a new independent messenger to highlight the benefits of geothermal energy. This then allows us to have a separate, brand new conversation with some new narrative streams which are backed up by hard data to allow for coordinated engagement within member states. This is at national expert level, this is at ministerial level, and even head of state level, within the EU at the same levels between the Parliament, the Commission, and the councils. Importantly, the media, but this also means to kind of build up this momentum. We need to bring in thought leaders, we need to get our customers to be more vocal about the benefits of geothermal, we need to get academia, industry, a whole host of people who take part in mainstream conversations around the subjects that we're interested in will be picking up and pushing geothermal. And then the idea is that this will then manifest itself into some form of political support, which will then lead to growth targets either at an EU level, well certainly at an EU level and at member state levels, that they then unlocks funding. It allows us to build capacity where capacity is needed, and combining all of those together, we have the geothermal decade, the decade where geothermal goes from being an important technology, but one that's perhaps ignored, to one of the technologies that we talk about regularly whenever there's a conversation around renewable energy, or energy transition, or solving the climate crisis, or industrial strategy. That's the purpose of the conversation that we're going to have today. So with that in mind, the next step on the agenda, sorry, actually, before we move on to the next step on the agenda, is everybody okay with this, with the purpose of what we're trying to deliver? And does anybody have any kind of comments at this very, at the start of our discussion today? Okay, well, look, like I said, this is, as Philippe has said as well, this is an open conversation, so it's not kind of, loads and loads of presentations. This is us discussing, and the slide decks are there to allow us to have that conversation. So on the agenda, after we've had the kind of the welcome and introduction, I'm going to quickly run through the policy landscape. My colleagues Philippe and Thomas will then talk through the, where we are in terms of the market for geothermal, and then what we have done in terms of past visionary statements on geothermal energy in the EU. So I'll start off with the policy landscape. So the objective of our kind of approach to the policy landscape is to identify in the red circle the key areas that drive and create a market for geothermal. So this is anything that's related to a regulatory compulsion to install geothermal, funding to realise that geothermal, any kind of capacity building, that's the red spot. This is the intense parts of the activity that we're going to undertake as a secretariat, but also collectively as an entity. Then we have in the outer ring, we have anything that kind of effectively raises the profile of geothermal and kind of helps reinforce the kind of core priorities. So these are narrative strands, initiatives, for example, at a European level, like the renovation wave or the energy system integration. These are not directly related to geothermal, but actually all roads lead to geothermal. So these kind of help build that mood music. And then on the outer side, where we have to kind of pay attention, but it's not a core focus of what we do, are the kind of areas that might trip us up as an organization, trip up the narrative that we're trying to build, or worse still, divert the political attention and any funding that should be going to geothermal. So this is the kind of the bullseye, this is the target space that we're focused in on. And together with the whole policy team, we've had we sat down and kind of identified the core areas that are going to drive the market for geothermal over the next presidency. So this is the German presidency, the Portuguese, and the Slovakian one. And you can see, like, front and center in red, you have the Renewable Energy Directive, the 2030 framework, or as we now refer to it as the Fit for 55% framework. Terrible terminology, but it's from the European Commission. We have 10E, which refers to infrastructure funding. We have the Modernisation Fund, which is targeted towards member states within 10 member states within Eastern Europe. So this ranges from Bulgaria to Romania to Poland to Hungary, Czechia, Slovakia, etc., etc. So there's 10 member states there, huge amount of funding, and this money is likely to increase in the next couple of weeks as well, because it's part of the deal to get a few countries to sign up to the 2030 agenda overall. So this is a big activity. We have the Energy Efficiency Directive together with renewables and kind of state aid. This is the regulatory drivers for geothermal. But importantly, we have Horizon 2020, the end of the Horizon 2020 program and the Horizon Europe program, which is where we have a lot of funding for research activities and kind of shaping that space for the innovation and the technological advances or business model advances within the geothermal sector. And this closely links to the Innovation Fund, which will be drip feeding money into large-scale commercial demonstration projects over the next decade. Somewhere in there, we're going to try and find a legal space to put risk insurance at a European level. And at the same time, in order to allow member states to use their own public funding, we have to kind of smooth the ability for governments to put money into geothermal. And this is the role of state aid, which it is potentially a blessing, but if designed incorrectly, can actually be an obstacle. And then on the kind of the outside of that, the things that will help kind of build the momentum and the mood music are, the geothermal strategy, the conversation we're having today, the modelling that's going to be associated with it. We have legislative initiatives around renovation waves, sector integration. There is a big conversation increasingly happening about what happens with the oil and gas sector in terms of their own just transition. And there's a huge opportunity for geothermal to shape that space. We already have a coal transition happening, and you can see the direct linkages between that and the Modernisation Fund. So this could potentially be a template for the oil and gas transition. What we also need to do is to have better cooperation between the Secretariat and the national associations and our membership overall. We have a new dimension around lithium, geothermal lithium, and the way in which that can tap into an industrial strategy around mobility, whole portable energy storage. And then we have a big conversation around heat pumps, because we know the renovation wave is going to drive, it should drive investments in buildings requiring more shallow geothermal opportunities. Now, that's the space we operate in. There are a couple of things which are problematic for us. So fossil fuel subsidies, they are there. We're going to have to find a way to crack this egg open. At the same time, the methane strategy potentially could divert funding from the 10E, which we need for geothermal projects, into kind of reinforcing the existing gas infrastructure, which makes it harder and harder for us to break into the heating market, for example. And then we have the hydrogen, which on the electricity side of things is seems to be a very dominant story, but it potentially could suck out market opportunities and also the funding that we need for geothermal. So this is the space that we operate in terms of the policy landscape for geothermal over the next year, 2 or 3 years. I'll now hand over to Philippe, and if there's any questions, you can come in now, or we can maybe group up questions after we've completed this segment of the agenda. Philippe, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Sanjay, for the introduction. So if we look at the agenda, also Sanjay presenting the policy context, I know maybe it's Thomas to present the market development in Europe.
Thank you, Philippe. I hope you can hear me fine. So
yes.
I'm going to make a first. Yeah. All right. I see that there is one raised hand from Miklos. Just Sanjeev, maybe before I start, Miklos is asking, what do you understand under the geothermal modeling segment, if you want to enter that already?
Okay, thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Miklos, for the question. So the modelling segment is actually something we're going to deep dive on into the next presentation. But it's really how do we get the appropriate background numbers to help us shift the conversation forward. So what I'm going to do is kind of bring everyone up to speed on how this has happened. You know, a couple of examples that we have in the past, and Philippe is going to touch upon one or two of those, and then what I want to do is to shape the back end of this conversation around what do we actually want to have in terms of the content for that modelling. So maybe it's best if we kind of address that conversation, the answer to that specifically later on, because we're going to have about half an hour to go through that together, if that's okay.
All right. So I'm going to deliver a very short presentation about the state of the European geothermal market. So this comes from the GEOGEC market report 2019 to a very large extent. So you might already be familiar with some of these figures, but it's always good to have a nice reminder. What happened here? Okay. So yeah, so there are about 130 geothermal electricity plants in Europe today. The main driver for this growth for the growth in geothermal electricity in recent years has been the Turkish market. In 2019, the EU geothermal heating and cooling market passed two fairly significant thresholds. First, it overcome the 2 gigawatt thermal threshold for geothermal district heating and cooling, and it passed the threshold of 2 million geothermal heat pumps as of the end of 2019. So regarding electricity production, as we can see, the Turkish market is again the main driver of new installations, with 150 megawatts of installed capacity in 2019 of new capacity. The EU market overall is quite slowed down by notably by the impact of quite a few stop and go policies regarding notably support schemes. So in 2019, the only EU plant commissioned for electricity is the Holzkirchen plant in Germany, so 3 megawatts. And then so we also have the Icelandic market, which is continuing to slowly expand with new plants, and also with the retrofits and increased capacity of older plants, such as typically the Charnaflag plant, which was expanded from 3 to 5 megawatts in 2019. Now, geothermal, as Sanjeev mentioned, and as we will be discussed, is quite an important resource also for the energy transition of the electricity sector because of its high capacity factors. So we can see that all the markets where EJEC has enough data to make this calculation. The geothermal capacity factor is above 70%, all the way to 82% in France. And with when we look at specific plants operating at almost 100% of the year, or nearly 100% of the time. So it's a base load technology, but that can also provide flexibility. It is also a technology that is fairly rapidly expanding. So we have the Turkish market that continues to be in expansion. As of 2019, the feed-in tariff was prolonged to allow the completion of these plants to be able to benefit from the current support framework. So that's a fairly good measure for the Turkish market. In Italy, we have quite a few projects that are, let's say, planned or under investigation. And now it's quite important for Italy to have more stable and more visibility, let's say, in the support scheme, because Italy typically we had this issue of very long delay to have the licensing and authorization process completed, and as well in the past 2 to 3 years, very important uncertainty regarding the availability of a support scheme. And now what we can see that more and more countries are looking to really get into the geothermal electricity market. Most notably Greece and Switzerland have quite extensive plans. Spain as well is looking to enter the space, notably with the Canary Islands. Now looking at geothermal district heating and cooling, we have it's a market that was mainly carried by the Netherlands over recent years, also driven by, let's say, older markets such as Italy, which is expanding its use of geothermal heat. So not necessarily developing new wells, but making a better use of cogeneration from existing power plants. We have Greece that is commissioning as well geothermal district heating systems. And one interesting milestone as well in 2019 is the fact that Spain commissioned its first geothermal district heating and cooling system. The network has been actually commissioned in 2020, but the system was operational as of the end of 2019. And this is actually an interesting trend in the overall scheme of the EU energy transition and EU politics, as it is geothermal from, if I'm not mistaken, from a repurposed coal mine. Now, as we can see here, we have the repartition of geothermal district heating in Europe. So it's quite well spread out, as you can see. Obviously, Iceland has the largest capacity. In continental Europe, well, the Paris Basin is a very important market, and it's often ignored actually by stakeholders outside, let's say, of the geothermal sector. And then what we can see that with the lighter blue dots, there's really a desire and opportunities to expand the geographical scope of geothermal district heating and cooling to new areas. So typically, many projects ongoing in Germany, in Central Europe, or in Poland as well. So this is quite an important drive, this geographical expansion. Here, what we can see on this slide is that well, most countries are really looking to expand their use of geothermal district heating and cooling. So you have in blue the number of existing plants, and in red the number of plants that are in development or investigation for geothermal district heating. And you can see that France has quite extensive plans, so does Germany. So Netherlands is continuing to expand its use of geothermal heating and cooling, but Poland has is an interesting market in that it's really looking to initiate a geothermal heating and cooling market nationally, and hopefully we should see in the coming years the first commissioning of new plants. Now looking briefly at the geothermal heat pump market. So this is a market that continues to be really dominated in terms of sales, especially, but also installed stock by Sweden and Germany. The French market, which has quite an extensive installed stock for geothermal heat pumps, is unfortunately not as dynamic regarding sales, with the, let's say, fairly negative impact of support scheme changes that were not quite offset yet. So the market has not yet recuperated to its previous levels. Interesting markets to flag again would be typically Poland and the Netherlands, which have and already had for a few years quite a positive dynamic in terms of penetration of geothermal heat pump in the heating and cooling market. What we can see as well when we look at the number of geothermal heat pumps per 1,000 households is that typically there's a huge gap between, let's say, the Scandinavian countries, so Sweden and Finland, to a lesser extent Denmark and Norway, and so could also consider Estonia in that regard, and the rest of Europe. Austria and Switzerland as well are quite dynamic, with nearly 3% of households, 3% of households basically having a geothermal heat pump. But as we can see, there's still quite a long way to go, and it's clearly highlighted by the degree of completion of the EU 2020 targets per member states for geothermal heat pumps specifically, where only Sweden actually completed its heat pump, its target. But most other countries actually are far below the targets, with typically even Finland, which has a good penetration rate, only having achieved about 30% of its objective. France is only at around 50%, and so on. So that's all for me. So it was a really brief presentation to get you the facts back in mind. So thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Thomas. Indeed, as you see from the agenda, we wanted just to start this session with an overview. I will be quite brief. It's already 10:30. What I want now to present you is a bit what we are in terms of modeling, roadmap, vision published in the sector. Probably many of you are familiar with this document, but it's interesting to see that when we are looking at the geothermal strategy for Europe, we have seen in the past some documents already published. You remember the first early geothermal data compilation started nearly 40 years ago with a book on the tertiary heat flow in Europe to see a bit what was the potential. It led to the first European Commission publication on geothermal, which is the Atlas of subsurface temperature in the European Community. And it was quite interesting to see that at that time, indeed, the European Commission was putting some emphasis on geothermal. It continued in 2002 with an update of the Atlas, the European Commission publication of the Atlas of Geothermal Resources in Europe, with different figures on heat flow temperature at 1 to 2 kilometers and European geothermal resources. With that, it led also to this map, quite known as the heat flow density. But this was just scientific publication. And the main issue we realized 10 years ago, it's that geothermal was not really considered as an important energy sources in modeling. It's coming to the discussion introduced by Sanjeev and questioned by Miklos Antic about geothermal modeling segment. In 2011, the European Commission published for the first time European Commission Energy Roadmap 2050 to see a long-term scenario. And that we see that geothermal in the modeling tools, being for electricity, or you will see in the next slide for heating and cooling, was completely underestimated. More or less, they were planning, you could see some scenario, we are planning 1.6 gigawatt in 2050. We have nearly that already today in 2020. So we noticed already 10 years ago the issue that we need to improve the quality of data about geothermal potential, but also the message we want to develop. And already from 2011, we saw that for heating and cooling it was dramatic. It was not only for geothermal, but in general for renewable heating and cooling. The modeling is not able to design any scenario. The European Commission model is planning a stagnation in the production between 2020 and 2030, and nearly until 2040. And just after that, you increase the production. So it's just artificially, by reducing the demand, that you increase the percentage. We could not expect for the next 10 years any growth in our sector. So you could see that the model is not able at all to report any data. So what we have done as EJEC already 10 years ago, we first launched the project GeoLake. The GeoLake project aimed at designing a strategy and to show the potential for electric production in Europe. And the final result was this map, already published in 2013, as a production from the geothermal sector. So GeoLake is a project from the geothermal actors. We continue our work as EJEC, and in 2012 we launched GeoDH, achieved in 2015, and GeoDH was to complement GeoLake electricity, GeoDH about geothermal district heating, and here we map that 25% of the population lives in areas suitable for geothermal district heating. So we show that for geothermal potential for heating cooling is quite large. Last but not least, in 2013 we launched Geothermal. Of course, we have not really assessed the potential for geothermal heat pumps. It's much more complicated because it's more a demand side approach than a supply side approach, as geothermal heat pumps can be installed anywhere. But this map was used also by European Commission for other purpose, is to show a bit where you can develop geothermal for heating, cooling with heat pumps. Where we are today in terms of modeling and roadmaps, we are here that the Commission is just published an impact assessment in 2020 for the new scenario 2030 and 2050, you could see. And here again, we see little reference to geothermal and probably a lot of confusion, and it's what Sandy have already introduced in the terminology, district heating, heat pumps, and geothermal. Sometimes we don't know where geothermal is, but in general, you could see that from this modeling, we have to really work on increasing awareness about geothermal, improving modeling, and last but not least, also have an independent study to confirm what the sector is saying. I will conclude with the latest publication we have done also to contribute to vision and roadmap. I think it's an excellent document from the ETIP Deep Geothermal, this vision for deep geothermal energy. I encourage you, if you're not familiar with, to look at it, with some design also for the city of the future, some key messages, and I think it will be important also to have that in mind when we go for the geothermal strategy: optimization, co-mapping, sustainability, stability and availability, resource potential, fit for purpose. So a lot of nice messages from the vision and the geothermal energy. And the last publication we had is from the RSC platform, the agenda for 2030-2040 about heating and cooling. I see as participant we have Javier, so maybe later, Javier, if you want to intervene to present more of this strategy. For geothermal, is not really giving all the figures about the potential, so it's why it's important now to go to more structured methodology and providing the right information. I was quite short because I see that it's already 10:40. The objective is more to have a discussion with you. So the presentation will be available also to all of you. And now I give back the floor to Sanya for the session 2.
Okay, thank you, Philippe. I'll just share my screen with everybody. Okay. Voila, perfect, thank you. Right, okay, so I'm going to race through some of these slides because, oh, sorry, where am I? There we go. Apologies. Right. Okay, I'm going to race through some of these slides because I really want us to get into the conversation and the brainstorm. So this is not a definitive. This is just an aid memoir. But there's two key things I want everyone to keep front and center from Philippe and Thomas's interventions. The first one is that from Philippe, we have done lots and lots of kind of visions for geothermal. Sometimes when they focus, they've been kind of sector specific. So we've had one on deep geothermal, something on electricity, something on district heating. And what we want to do is to put everything together, but to have the visual attractiveness that was in the deep, the vision for deep geothermal. That was a beautiful, a really attractive document to look at. It makes the information flow so much easier. That's something we want to keep. And I think from Thomas, there's a couple of key messages which jump out, which is that actually, in some instances, one or two of our markets for geothermal are really significantly underperforming, and what we want to do is to kind of boost them, but we want to boost the entire sector. So it's not just the heat pumps, it's the district heating which is taking off, and we want to really increase that momentum and push it to wherever possible to the top. So this, you know, the objective that we're talking about here is just to have a political conversation, and that political conversation means that we've got to put a number on the table. And this is a number for the true potential for geothermal, all types of geothermal in the EU, in the context of the Green Deal and the 2030 targets, maybe the 2040 targets, but definitely 2050. This is essentially what we want to do, because once we have this number firmly locked into the political discussion, then we're going to have a target, and that target will unlock finance that will build out the community, and it will allow for direct investment. So the market report will be the center where we measure the progress and the growth of the geothermal decade once we get the policy architecture right. Just to put this in context, when you hear the Commission talk in their recent communications around the 2030 climate target plan, again, they talk about wind and solar, and how much wind there's going to be and how much solar there's going to be. No mention of how much geothermal there's going to be. There's specific aspects within that same impact assessment on how many gigawatts of solar are going to be installed and the different baselines. So basically, how effective is policy going to be to grow the solar market? How effective is it going to be in growing the wind market? And now, how effective is it going to be in growing the market for hydrogen, whether it comes from renewables or fossil sources? So, you know, what we want to do is just to be alongside all of these. So we are a part of the space and a part of the mainstream conversation. But there is no mainstream high-level political conversation about geothermal today, and that's partly because, as Philippe has just said, you know, there are things that we are all very, very familiar. I put this slide in just as a reference point, but realistically speaking, every single one of these are the areas that we're going to address either through the studies that we're going to do or building out stronger narratives and communication tools and mechanisms to allow us to capture the airtimes, to shift people's perceptions, to build out the champions, to remove all of the areas where geothermal energy is kind of hidden as renewable heating, or, you know, biomass, heat pumps don't show up distinguish between geothermal heat pumps and non-geothermal heat pumps. District heating doesn't identify geothermal district heating, so on and so forth. We want to be front and center in all of these. So to do that, we have to work out how we're going to do it. And that's the purpose of the conversation today. Now, to do that, we have to work out the various stages we need to move through to the point at which we're at a decision, which is on the far right of your screen, where we have where our leaders will decide the growth target for geothermal. But to get there, we have to start logically taking people through the journey with us. So we've got to, you know, we have a stage of ideas where we're kind of looking at what are the solutions, what are the problems that we need to address. And this is where bringing heat and putting heat on the same level as electricity in terms of the priority areas for decarbonisation is a crucial factor for us. We've seen some movement. We've got to make sure that that focus is as intense on heat as it's been on electricity for the last decade. And then we move into a debate where we're really looking at what are the questions we're trying to answer, and more importantly, how are we setting up those questions so that geothermal is the answer. Whatever the question is, geothermal is the answer, whatever shape of geothermal it is. And to do that, we've got to work out how we build out our kind of political support across, you know, a whole series of entities, but also play this kind of debate debate out in a public mainstream media discourse. So it could be from academics down to policymakers, but it's going to be a public conversation somewhere. And then that turns into a policy conversation, which is, okay, well, there's, what can you actually do legally? And that's kind of where we're moving towards by Q2 next year, when the Commission is going to come out with legislation. We need to make sure that geothermal is locked into that legislation space, because if it's locked in there, then everybody's forced to talk about geothermal. The same way they're going to be forced to talk about hydrogen, or how much wind and how much solar, and how much greenhouse gas emissions we're going to reduce. We want to be locked into that space to allow us then to work out, well, actually, what is the target that we have agreed? So this is the space through which we operated. There are different steps, and the question for us is to work out where we are, but more importantly, how do we move from the ideas to the debate, from the debate to the policy, to the debate from the policy to the decision. And to do that, we have to recognise that a target is only going to be agreed if there is a sufficient weight of public political conversation around geothermal, its numerous benefits, its significant contribution to the energy system, to the economy, to jobs, to clean health, to a whole host of issues. And it's only then that we're going to get the political momentum, and the messengers within this are going to be, aside from EDGEC and the geothermal community that exists today, we need to have a broader industry. So these may be customers saying, hey, look, we need to decarbonise our paper mills, for example. Geothermal is our answer. Down to civil society who are saying, well, actually, we need to build more windmills, we need to build more solar panels, and we need to build more geothermal capacity. Down to think tanks who, when they talk about kind of, the 100% renewable models, they always brace them around wind and solar. They need to recognise that actually geothermal is the third pillar that makes this a successful activity. We need governments to be talking about it much more prominently than they are at the moment, and we also need to have EU institutions putting geothermal forward whenever there's a piece of research or a research funding or so on and so forth, to a dedicated pot design for geothermal, and it's much bigger financial contributions than we have at the moment. So what's the theory of change? How do we get people to talk about geothermal? So the first option is we could do it ourselves. We could produce another report from EDGEC or from our members, and we could write it best because we know this better than anyone else. But in order to kind of move into a mainstream debate, the messenger is super, super important. And that's why we need to have somebody come in who's outside the geothermal community to say how wonderful geothermal is, because that's how we pique everybody's interest in the subject. I'll give you one case example afterwards. So we're looking for an independent piece of research, which our community inputs into. So we're effectively giving them all the data, and then they're going to basically put it in their own words, and then we're going to rewrite those words for us. Then we can have a series of kind of country-specific activities. This is a side option, but I'm looking in the first box on the left-hand side at the moment. We can have a series of mini reports if we want to. We can discuss that later. But the crucial thing is from this independent research, we are posed with three things. One, a series of corporate questions. So what are the investment criteria that are needed for our customers to invest in geothermal? The second one is what are the technical barriers that are holding back geothermal? How do we highlight them independently and then write them in a way in which policymakers and decision makers have to address them? But most importantly, we have a series of political questions, which is the wonderful contribution that geothermal is going to make to our 2030 targets, how it's going to bring down system costs, heating bill costs, electricity stability, infrastructure, etc., etc. All those big political costs, which have basically said, well, we need to go for hydrogen and we need to pump loads of money into that. We want them to basically say, no, we need to go to geothermal and pump loads of money into that. So that's the first step. That then allows us to move into the debate space, which is the middle part of the screen here. And in the middle part of the screen here, this is really the intensive coordinated work that we're going to have to do here in Brussels, but also in every single member state that we have members in, and also work out ways in which we can have that conversation where we don't have a membership in, the kind of the new virgin territory for our sector. How do we grow those spaces? How do we get them talking about geothermal as the answer to everything? We're not the silver bullet, but if there is ever a silver bullet, it's going to look like geothermal. That's the kind of That's the kind of conversation thing that we want to leave with everybody. And this means, again, talking to everybody, but also getting them to speak. So not us saying, well, actually, for the paper sector, we're the answer, but to get the paper sector saying we're the answer, to get the chemical sector to say that geothermal is perfect, to get utilities to say, well, actually, you know, our whole business model is going to be based upon, you know, wind, solar, and geothermal, or geothermal and other renewables. To get think tanks to say, well, actually, geothermal is the answer. Everybody talking about it, and through that, we start to get industry champions. And the industry champions are super important. And this is the key here is how diverse they are. The more diverse they are, the more likely politicians will listen to them at a regional level, at a national level. And then we can start to build a majority of governments who are going to say, listen, guys, geothermal is super important. The same way it's taken 4 member states to put hydrogen on the table, or it took really 6 member states to put offshore wind on the table. We're looking for the kind of the member states that are going to help us put geothermal firmly on the political table for any kind of EU policy debate. And therefore, any EU solution, and whatever that EU solution is, that will be the realization of the geothermal strategy, because that will lock us into whatever legislation, whatever funding, and whatever capacity is needed to realize the dream that we put on everybody's tables. So this is the theory of change. In a nutshell, we need independent messengers to start a broad mainstream conversation, and that mainstream conversation allows us to build political engagement and government support for an EU solution to advancing geothermal. And that's the crux. So let me just give you one example. The offshore wind, you will have seen from the Horizon 2020 and the Horizon Europe conversations that there's this big push on offshore wind. The Commission is coming out with communication in a couple of months' time. This is all driven by the German government, who put it on the table. The reason why the German government put it on the table was 9 years ago, an NGO basically came up with the idea that actually we need to build lots of offshore grid in order to bring down the cost of wind, and that will then bring down the cost of decarbonisation and the energy transition. That was their idea, and they got a little bit of funding from from a philanthropy organisation called the Children's Investment Fund, and from that you had the North Sea Grid Initiative, which ran for a couple of years. There's a lot of high-level conversations bringing together the member states, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Ireland, UK. I think France was included as well, but I can't remember. But anyway, there's a cluster of member states who are all starting to talk about, well, actually, how do we go about this? The only reason those member states started talking about it is that E3G got a company to produce an independent cost estimates of how much it would reduce the cost of wind energy, and also how much it would make decarbonisation cheaper in those countries. That was the entry point for the conversation, something we want to copy this time around. And then the crucial thing is that allowed people to build up permanent conversations. It forced the governments to sit down and start thinking about, well, actually, let's do our own modelling and see how cheap it can be. And actually, one of the conclusions from some of the government modelling is that you've got to work together across member states. So it's not like a Western European or a Northwestern European solution. It's got to be a European solution, because we need European money for this. And then before you knew it, Germany, a lot of people started working on the German presidency, which is now 2 years ago, and they basically worked to try and get something out of the German government so that they have something they could showcase as this is what Germany did. Now, of course, the hydrogen people have done the same thing. So Germany is now championing offshore wind, and it's championing hydrogen. But what we want to do is to get Germany and other member states to say, guys, geothermal is the answer that we want. Okay, let me stop there for a second. And maybe Philippe, if there's kind of people who've raised questions, or maybe we give a chance for people to come in and give their views on what we've discussed so far. Is that okay with you, Philippe? Do we have time?
Yeah, just I see there's no question except the one from Miklo. So what do you understand under the geothermal modeling segment?
Okay. Let me come on to that. So on that Mikos's question is going to be answered when we come to the content part. So it's basically the end of the presentation. Okay, well look, I will run through to the next step, the next two sections, and then effectively it's an open conversation. So there we can invite people who've made their presentations to jump in. But you know, I really would appreciate some thoughts on one, do we think this is the right thing for us to be doing? I think it's important to ask that question. We shouldn't, you know, we should not be afraid to say, you know, I don't think this is a good idea, you know, and at the same time, I think we should be, you know, does this plan sound like a good plan? Is there anything that we could do on top of this plan, or can we change it or tweak it in a certain way to allow it to be more effective? Those are questions I throw open to everybody. Okay, let me move into the engagement side of things. So this is where we take the kind of the policy ideas and we turn them into a kind of strategic communications activity. And this is something that we have built with our comms team. Valeria has kind of worked with us on this one as well to make sure that we're kind of integrated in what we do. So part of this is having kind of policy conversations and kind of launching ideas, trying to, you know, effectively we're going fishing. We're dropping a maggot into the water, waiting for people to bite onto all of the messages that we're starting to fly out. Then on top of that, we're trying to capture the normal discussions around the 2030 climate target package by basically putting geothermal as the answer in everywhere. And that means, you know, a bit more targeted messaging, a bit more visibility for geothermal in terms of the policy debate. So turning up to discussions, but actually organising themselves as well, so that we are drawing people towards us. And then to do that, we have to use a form of mind control. Okay, you know, flying kites, mind control, new blood. This is just how you know, the easiest way to summarise what we're really trying to do here. The mind control, what we're doing is we're physically bringing people to see geothermal. Now, one of the things we've realised is that many people, even in the Commission or in the Parliament, who talk about geothermal, haven't actually ever been to a geothermal plant. So I've been in touch with a few of our members, and I think we want to have a targeted approach to make sure all of the key decision makers in the EU institutions, but also national governments, get a chance to actually visit their local geothermal installation, whether it's a deep geothermal, whether it's a district heating system or a household heat pump, whatever it is, or an industrial application, whatever it is, they need to physically see it. We want to take a photograph of them there, and then we can pin that to them every single time. This is how we start to flip them over to the world of geothermal. I mean, at the same time, what we need to do is we bringing new people into this space, the kind of the new blood, the people who are quite influential, opinion makers, and to get them to talk about geothermal. I'll give you an example of one of those. In fact, I'm going to give you a couple of examples now. So this is the Commissioner for Energy. EGEC forced her to come out with a statement, which is, you know, her saying geothermal energy deserves more attention than in the past. This is in a letter she wrote back to us, because we have been writing non-stop letters to Miss Simpson saying, look, take geothermal seriously, you know, we need to be included here, we need to be included there. We forced her to come back in. Now what she needs to do is to say this on a public space, not on a letter, and then we can start to build that momentum here. We have this is from E.ON in Sweden. This is the CEO of the Swedish E.ON utility, and he's basically said effectively geothermal is emission-free, noise-free, space and space-saving, making it the best solution for urban energy systems in the future. This is a fantastic quote. We need him to say this again, not on a press release, but on a public platform, back to the Swedish government, back to other governments, back to other parts of E.ON, so we can get them much more involved in the things that we want to do. In terms of kind of influencers and opinion leaders, Michael Liebrich, the founder of the Bloomberg New Energy Finance, one of the most sophisticated energy models out there on renewable energy, he's just recently, just by pure chance, picked up on some of the messages that we've been coming out with, and he gave a brilliant quote here saying, look, if we don't get the policy architecture right, we faced a choice between a lost decade or a geothermal decade. That's fantastic. We need to get much more of people like him talking about geothermal and making a choice between we've got to get the policy right, or we're going to miss our climate targets and our energy targets. So The next session then is just to, again, these are questions for you. So, you know, we roughly know who we think we need to be reaching out to. We know why we need to be reaching out to them. The question then is where is the access within our community? What type of access? How would we get them to engage with us? So we know the kind of governments and EU institutions, you know, at EDGIC, you know, the whole policy team is 100% focused on the kind of the EU institutions, and we know that our national associations are 100% focused on the national governments. We've got to work together to make sure that we start to bring out the champions within those communities. Where we have customers, it would be great to have like a customers coming out and saying, well, actually, we have in geothermal at whatever level, and it's fantastic. Let's get more of those kind of messages coming out. The same way when you go to, you know, when you go to kind of conventional retail activities like cars and so on and so forth, it's always happy customers, happy families. We want happy geothermal users to come out and say, we love geothermal. The more of this messaging that comes out, the stronger it makes us look. In terms of media, again, who are the influencers? Well, you know, my colleague Valeria, she's and the comms team have basically mapped out, you know, quite extensively across EU and international. We need to work with our members on the national and the regional media that we need to be influencing, and somewhere or another they need to be reached out to and brought into the geothermal landscape, whether we have to bring them up to speed with the kind of the technology and its applications, or whether we just need to help them write stories about how wonderful it is. That's a huge bit of work, but it's something we've got to do together. Think tanks, workers, trade unions, installers, the Geotranet community, all of these people are our champions. Let's give them a platform to tell the story about geothermal and the benefits that geothermal has brought through to them. This also includes drillers as well. And then manufacturing industry. Excuse me. As part of the industrial strategy, as part of you know, the ability to manufacture and export, the ability to innovate and to sell innovative technologies globally, so not just within Europe, globally, that's a huge benefit. And actually, there are loads of examples of that within our membership. We just need to find a way to. We just need to concertedly work together to push that into the media and out into the space, so that we're not just the energy solution, we're the industrial strategy solution, we're the jobs growth and sustainability solution to everything we want to do. So this is how we've got to start systematically working through who has access, what, and how do we do the engagement, and then ultimately who's going to take the lead on the engagement. We're not going to get the answer today, but we started the conversation and we're going to build this out together. Okay, is there any comments there before I launch into the last section?
What I see, Sonia, that we have received some presentations. So I know that Thomas Colbell from ENBW, Andre Deinhardt from BVG wants also to deliver a presentation. Okay, cool. Okay, so look, I'm just going to quickly wrap up. I'm conscious that we've been talking for too long, so this is going to be really, really simple. Excuse me, my chest is a bit tight at the moment. So what we want to do is to go back and look at, you know, as Mikos has said, as Philippe has said, and Thomas have highlighted, the geothermal is just not present in any of the modelling that the Commission uses, that governments use to look at decarbonisation pathways. Now we are working closely with Eurostat to at least get Eurostat to factor in geothermal heat pumps. But what we need to do is to change the discourse. And to change the discourse, we need to come up with our own model or our own analysis, which shows that actually geothermal is really important. It needs to be factored into everybody's thinking. To do that, we need to have a reputable brand to deliver the analysis, because a lot of the times it's the brand that opens the door. So here, these are some well-known organisations and institutions that have done high-level reports like this in the past. Primes, for example, it was 7 years ago that Euroelectric got Primes to talk about the electrification and electrify everything, and we've been hearing that for nearly a decade now. You know, these are looked is the people who worked with Solar Power Europe to produce their 100% renewables, and that solar is the answer to everything. Studies, you know, we need to bring these people into, one of those people to be the messenger, and it just adds that level of credibility to the data that we're going to be providing them.
I think it's important that when we look at the scope, we cover every single aspect of geothermal. So, so that we're not just looking at the kind of the deep and shallow aspects, but we're looking at the lithium, we're looking at the industrial applications, the manufacturing decarbonisation applications in chemicals and paper, et cetera, but also the growth model, the export potential throughout the whole of the activities that we do. We're looking at, in terms of timing, we know that June 2021 legislation is going to come out, so we know roughly towards the end of February, the Commission, most of everything is going to be locked down within the Commission. So if we want to get something out of the Commission, this work has to be ready before February, so that we have time to get it into the Commission and we have time to start making a lot of noise about it. And then the question for us is, given the short time scale, is how do we want this? Do we want a big, long, complicated report, or do we want a series of core data and graphs with short write-ups, which EDGEC together, the policy team can help write and the communications team can help make attractive together. So these are open questions for us on how we're going to go about those things. But this is the first step in the process that we're talking about. And then more specifically, which member states do we want to target? So which are the key kind of countries that we need to influence? Are they good countries at organising others? So for example, Lithuania is a good country at organising others around solar. Germany is great at organising everybody. Where are the national examples which can become European examples? The industrial strategy side of things I've already mentioned, industrial decarbonisation I've done. Agriculture is super important. It's not just the greenhouse food production, but we should also be looking at the food and beverages overall, all of which need low temperatures of heat, and also at the same time cooling requirement as well. And actually one of the things we forgot to mention is cooling aspects of geothermal, and we need to find a way to bring that in. What are the jobs? How do we measure the impact on employment, on health costs, security of supply, etc., etc.? How do we do a financial number or a greenhouse gas number or a lives saved number? Benchmarks, how do we measure the success? So are we measuring it against, again, security of supply, infrastructure savings or clean air benefits? Or do we have a reference number for CO2, or do we map it against coal and gas, and so that we can have we can tie it into where the political discourse is at the moment? These are open questions. What kind of assumptions do we have around geothermal technologies themselves? How long does it take to construct a project? Cost assumptions, a whole host of other aspects that we need to bring in. So that's in response to Miklos's question. But I've run through the slides, so there's enough for us to spend the rest of the time going through the presentations that our colleagues have, and having a full-on debate on where we go next. Philippe, over to you.
Yes, I don't know. Do we have any questions first to start? No, maybe I don't know, Andre, if you want to start deliver your presentation?
Yes, I can do so. Can I?
I just see that. Sorry, before we have Elif Kaimasi who wants to raise his hand. So you're self-muted. Feel free to intervene, Elif. You're self-muted. Well, okay. If not, Andre, I give you a floor, and maybe Elif will come back later. So you have a presenter now.
So I hope you see my computer now.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So I have only some contributions. First of all, I want to say thank you for the very, very interesting presentations. I will focus on the legislation in Germany a little bit. And yeah, for our point of view, geothermal is actually not competitive. We are in situations that natural gas is quite cheap in Germany, especially, and geothermal installations quite expensive. And there are different reasons for that, and we try to change it. At first, I want to start with some projects to understand in which directions are the projects going. And this is a project close to Frankfurt am Main with more or less 1,000 flats and 260 probes deliver the heat for this project. And next, this is a new old castle. It's a museum, or it will be a museum in the middle of Berlin. And there you have also probes, shallow geothermal, which contributes heat and cooling. And this is in Schwerin. It's an ongoing project, middle deep geothermal energy for district heating there, district heating system there. And then I think the most of you know this ongoing project in Munich. And the aim is to deliver heat for 80,000 people south of Munich. So what I think is we should advertise more with this really great projects. And I'm sure in all other member states we have also very nice projects, and perhaps we should in a point of advertising more focus on this project. So we try to work on it. Last week we had a heating week, renewable heating week, and we use it to bring this project to the politicians. And the market in Germany for heating, because in Germany heating is the most important part of the market for geothermal, is stagnating, and that is quite a problem. So you can see in electricity you have a growth in traffic, and especially in heat there is no growth. Only 40% are covered by renewables, and 90% of these renewables are bioenergy, not geothermal energy. So that's a problem, and the reasons I mentioned it before are the reason is that we are not competitive actually, and that gas, especially natural gas, is too cheap, and geothermal heat is too expensive. You have, for our point of view, three possibilities to change this. First is regulatory law. There are some news. We have the coal exit law with support geothermal. We have the building law, which forbids installation of oil heating systems up to 2026. And then we have the funding policies. There are a lot of movements in the last couple of months in Germany, and then you have the price signals. I will start with price signals. There is the idea to have this emission trade system, which is usually for the European level for electricity, that this also comes to the sector of heating from 2021, and it starts with a price of 25 euro per ton CO2 emission. And this is the first price signal, which hopefully change the situation that geothermal is expensive and natural gas is quite cheap. Then let's come to the funding policy. There we have the funding for near or for shallow geothermal installations. This year we have 35% up to 45% investment costs, which are funded by the German government. And this includes the drilling, connection lines, heat pumps, and so on. And what we see is a boom in this field of the shallow geothermal in this year. But I have also to mention that, and you can see it here in this overview, that also gas installations are supported by the government, also with 35% if they are in combination with solar installations. So that it's a little bit crazy, especially if you consider that we try to move forward to a climate neutral community. There is an ongoing discussion to change this support scheme, and the idea is to simplify the landscape of programs, and it's not sure if it will be this an improvement or not. So this new system starts on January the 1st. Then we have a quite complex support scheme for deep geothermal energy. In the core, you have a funding for the drilling and some loans, and only few support if you build a new heating network. There you have also some discussions to change this, and I think it's a good development because the government consider to support investment costs by 40%. This includes drilling, heating networks, and so on. And in addition, there is a consideration to have also a feeding tariff for heat up to 7 cents per kilowatt hour if you use big or large heating pumps. But the budget is quite too low so far. Then we have also, it's a new development. We discussed for a long time with the politicians about it. We have a feeding tariff for heat if it is connected with a combined heat and power installation. And also, I think most of you know that we have the Renewable Energy Act, which provide us 25.2 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity from deep geothermal. There are also some changes upcoming. We are in discussion with our government so far. Perhaps one remark to the end. I get a call today from the Ministry of Energy, Germany, and he said, "Do you know the RED II from the EU?" And I said, "Oh, only a little bit. But what do you want?" And he said, "Yeah, in this direction, we are forced to simplify the Mining Act. So we really appreciate your work in Brussels, and it's really important. And perhaps in the future we have a more a simple way to install a deep geothermal power plants and installations in course of RED II." So, okay, so far from Germany. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel, Andre, for reporting this news, and indeed for RED II. Tell him that he should be prepared to RED III next year. I see that Miklos, you have several questions, so maybe we give you the floor orally, and if you can report what you wanted to ask. The floor is yours, Miklos.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm glad that this debate on geothermal strategy takes place. This is just for introductory note. However, in the terminology that has been listed by Sanjay, which was quite comprehensive and very well done, we must be very careful with the terms of geothermal modeling, because geothermal modeling in the current jargon of the profession leads to the resource modeling, and then we must, I think, find an alternative acronym in order to better clear this process. I understood what does it mean. What does it mean in the process of geothermal strategy? However, we must be very careful on terminology, because then my second question was that we want to speak a lot about geothermal. Of course, at EJEC we have a very powerful secretariat, a very powerful team, which lobbies a lot and contacts people in Brussels. However, we need support from the membership in terms of the companies who are members, who are operating geothermal power plants, and who could invite politicians from their own country, from the European Parliament, from everywhere, to visit these plants. And this can be with a twofold advantage, with the respect of communication by the respective company, and also by talking about geothermal, for the interest of the profession. So there should not be a selfish, let's say, exercise, but also it can be beneficial for the whole community. On the other hand, I don't know how much local associations, national associations, we do have with them regular meetings, EJEC, every year, at least in Offenburg. We did it this year virtually, and I think for next year will be the same. National associations who are affiliated to EJEC, this can help a lot in facilitating these visits, in speaking about geothermal. On the other hand, the rest of the workflow is very sound, and we must be very loud in what we are talking about, and show the clear benefits of geothermal, which are clear for everyone who listens today, but maybe it's not so clear for the other people. And with the excellent work which has been done with the GeoRisk project in highlighting not only the benefits but also the risk of geothermal and how to mitigate that, this is a strong exercise which must be linked to every speech about geothermal. Well, this is my, let's say, short note I wanted to talk about. However, I'm motivated to come back should other discussions rise.
Thank you, Miklos. I see also from the Q&A that Adele, you have several comments. Very best is we give you the floor orally, and you can raise your question or make your comments. You have also comments about tourism. I'm trying to unmute you. Yep. You're self-muted. You just have to unmute you and you can speak. Adele.
Thank you. I just had a brief comment. Many hints were given by Saniev about site production or improvement of the benefits and connected fields like agriculture, like decarbonizing industry and so on. I think that another main sector for joint, let's say, production is tourism. This is a main example in Iceland, like in New Zealand, where geothermal fields are developed jointly to tourism. And it is a main sector for many countries in Europe too. So joining geothermal to tourism, which is not only as a matter of economics, but also a very good example of energy and culture and other fields of the life of humankind, which are seldom joined in other energy. I think it's important to highlight. This is as a comment. And then I was asking if it is possible to have the slides from Germany Association, because I found them very interesting. Thank you.
Yes, we will ask Andre if he can forward maybe some of them or the full presentation. Thank you, Adele. I see also Gregor wants to intervene about feed-in tariff. So, Gregor, I give you the floor also. I have to find you in the list. Here you are. The floor is yours.
Okay, now it works. Sorry, I had problems with my microphone. No, I just wanted to make a comment on the presentation of Andre on incentives and the competitiveness, especially regarding electricity production. And we have a similar situation now in Austria in the moment. There will be a new law on renewable energy or electricity production, where geothermal is not mentioned in the moment. We are fighting to bring geothermal into this law of subsidies, and we would like to not focus so much on high feed-in tariffs, because I have the feeling or the fear that when you have a low temperature energy source, you need binary circuits, that if you have too high subsidies or feed-in tariffs, then it might be the risk that geothermal power plants might have a low efficiency, because they're just focusing on selling electricity. And we would like to focus more on combined heat and power in Austria. And instead of high feed-in tariffs, try to enable special funds to upgrade geothermal heating grids into combined heating and power grids, which might lead to higher efficiency of the overall process and lower share of waste heat, which just get killed by chillers. That was my comment.
Thank you, Gregor. I don't know, Thomas Kolbel from INBW, if you want to say something orally of the slides, you want to present them or we circulate them? I unmute you, you can speak. Yeah, floor is yours, Thomas.
Okay, Philip, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty fine. So actually, I can give some comments on the slide if you like.
I will show your slide?
Yeah. Please share the screen.
Yeah, you can start to speak if you wish.
I will do so. So actually, I just want to highlight a small facet, or maybe it's not a small facet of geothermal. I just want to do some remarks on geothermal heat in huge district heating systems. Could you please proceed to the next slide? Okay, so on the left-hand side, you see this well-known map of Germany where the three prominent region with very good geothermal conditions is mapped: the northern German basin and the Molasse basin around Munich area, and then you have the Oberrheingraben. And the white hexagons, they represent huge district heating systems, in most of the cases fired by fossil power plants. And if we just have an estimate of the number of people connected to this kind of district heating system, then the total amount is approximately 5.5 million clients. So if we intersect geothermal potential with the existing district heating grids and have in mind that the fossil power plants will be shut down latest in 2035 in Germany, then we see there is, on consumer side, a high demand, and on the potential geothermal resource, there is a good supply. And on the right-hand side, you see one of the projects we are dealing with in recent days. This is the area south of Mannheim, and they have our partner MVV has a district heating system in operation, which consists of 800 kilometers pipelines with 1 gigawatt thermal capacity, summarizing to 2,200 gigawatt hours of heat per year. So this is one of the hugest in Germany so far, and it is in recent days mainly fired by a huge fossil coal-fired power plant. And if this fossil power plant steps out of the system, we have to substitute the heat. Otherwise, we will not just lose the power plant infrastructure, we will lose the district heating system infrastructure as well. So could we go to the next slide? And let's have a small look to the policy objectives. You see on the left-hand side in the table that energy industry and the buildings, they have to reduce their CO2 emissions with high values in Germany at latest in 2030. And what could be the energy source for us? The challenge is decarbonization of heat sector, and geothermal could be one of the major players in this subject. The application I don't need to discuss with you because every one of you is fully informed about that. But the motivation for utility renewable energy as a heat source is financially competitive with other renewable energies. And geothermal is scalable, it's adjustable, it delivers a stable value from an owner's perspective. The CO2 emission savings are remarkable, and the reduction of primary energy as required can come from geothermal. But there are some conflict areas, so we miss the financial support for heat plants, at least in Germany. And the licensing procedure here is highly time expensive. So we asked for a geothermal exploration license for our heat project in 2017. Right now we have 2020 and we have it not yet in hand. We will get it at the end of this year, but it took almost 3 years just to receive a license. What we learned so far is that we have insufficient access to the existing geological data. There will be some changes in the German laws, but they are not touching our project. So this is one of the major barriers from the technician's point of view. And there is another important subject, and this is the last bullet point. From the geothermal resource, we receive constant brine temperature, but the flow temperature in the district heating grid is dynamic. So we have to deal with that. It needs some modern infrastructure to optimize source temperature versus flow temperature in the district heating grid. Could you proceed to the next slide, Philip? So just to give you an idea of what we have to do, it is just what is given by government, right? We have to have a compound annual growth rate for heat starting from 0.0% to 8% in 2050. This means 12% per year. This is not a small number. And the transformation of the grid-connected district heating will reduce the CO2 emissions. That's quite obvious, but it can reduce the emission without any intervention in the local heating systems of the clients. So we don't need to go to their heating system and to adjust something, or they don't have to do it on their own and paying for that. So let's assume someone has an oil burning system at his house and he needs to switch to district heating. Then he just has to be linked to the system and there is no extra cost downstairs apart from the dismantling cost. And this might be a good reason for people to accept geothermal heat. And this is somewhat different from geothermal electricity, where we have more or less no local benefits. For Germany, approximately 30 to 50 terawatt hours per year could be given by already existing grid-connected district heating systems. That's a quite challenging number, but it's a good number all in all. And another subject might be for the end consumer that we can reduce our CO2 emissions from the whole country perspective without any intervention in his home or at his home. So this is one of the major arguments for me. If we are going to local people, we don't touch their privacy. We just switch their energy resource in the district heating net. Okay, there should be one more slide, I guess. Or was it the last already? No, it was the last already. So that's what I wanted to present. District heating is a major challenge and a major chance for geothermal in recent days. Not only in Germany, I believe it can play a major role all over Europe, especially in regions with very good geothermal conditions. So that's it, Philip. That was my contribution.
Philippe, can I just jump in now? If that's
yeah,
okay?
I think we have done the tour, the table of the members. So the floor is back to you for the last session.
Okay, look, that's perfect, and thank you, Thomas, for that parting comment, because this is one of the big opportunities that we have on the radar at a European level. The Trans-European Networks for Energy, which basically looks at big infrastructure for electricity and gas, is going to be revised. It's going to come out in December this year. Now, as EDGEC, we've been pushing for district heating, geothermal district heating, to be key part of that. And the important thing about this is that if it's included within the Trans-European Networks for Energy, then it's able to access the Connecting Europe Facility Fund. And that's where the EU will also fund up to 55% of an infrastructure. So, for example, the building out of an existing geothermal district heating system, or the upgrade of an existing district heating system that doesn't have geothermal, for it to have geothermal applied to it. So I think this is a huge opportunity space for us, and I've actually heard this message quite consistently across the inputs that have come in. So I think we need to focus our activities on this one, and this is one of the areas where the strategy that we're talking about is going to be targeting. I just want to come back to Adele's point as well. I think the aspect on tourism is actually very, very good, and apologies that we didn't include it in, but we will definitely factor that back in. It's important that we tell the whole story and all of the benefits. So that's super crucial. Now, if I could kind of move our conversation forward, one of the things I sense from this discussion is that we will need to reorganize the way in which we engage with you. I think that, you know, building out a kind of coordinated series of activities means that the onus is on the secretariat, on myself, and my team to be much more regularly in contact with all of our members, and kind of help build out opportunities where we can work collectively together as well. So I think if there's a way in which we can, you know, if you think that there's an opportunity for the secretariat to help support the conversation in Germany, for example, the conversation in Austria, or elsewhere, then it's important that we have a dedicated a conversation around this one. So the door's always open. We'll be a bit more proactive in reaching out to you, but also please come back to us and let's work out what we can do together, because the legislation is coming in now. We know the legislation that's installed by member states now is also going to be revised, because we're about to do the new 2030 target. So I don't expect a significant change, but I expect an opportunity to go back and have to redo whatever national laws are out there, and that's an opportunity for us, if geothermal is missing, to put geothermal back in. The question then is how do we do this? You know, what's who do we need? How do we need to do it? When do we need to do it? This is all part of the broader strategy that we're looking at, because it's collectively working together is how we're going to move the space forward. So on that note, were there any observations from people who haven't had a chance to input into the conversation at the moment? Do we have any hands raised, or anybody who would like to go back and maybe talk about the approach, or the kind of the modeling we're going to do, or how better we can organize the relationship and the communications between the members and the secretariat?
Yeah, we have Joseph Bonafin from Turbulent. Joseph, the floor is yours. You can speak, Joseph. The floor is yours.
I'm sorry. Maybe I'm Francesca. Maybe it was a mistake. I'm Francesca Garofalo from Turboden. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yes. We want to. We believe that maybe we can underline and valorize geothermal also through SDGs, the sustainable development goals, and also promoting geothermal and the European know-how and technologies also in emerging development countries. So these are our inputs.
I think thank you, Francesca. I think the point about the emerging markets is a really important one, because there's we build out. We're in the process of kind of extending the EU's energy, the kind of legislative and regulatory requirements out to the Western Balkans, for example. They have to kind of comply with EU regulation. Now there's talk about extending it to the neighbourhood countries, but also we have an external action services. So this is the kind of diplomatic wing of the EU, and they are constantly looking at kind of clean energy partnerships. And this is something that we can tap into. There's an EU and African Union partnership as well, where there's an opportunity for us to insert energy on that agenda. And then there's kind of EU Latin America kind of bodies as well. So we can, we can. Sorry. It's okay. So let me just summarize. We can kind of work together to go through the machinery to move geothermal exports up that agenda. So maybe you can send me an email afterwards, and we can pick this conversation and take it forward. And
we have a last one more, Mr. Volkan Öztürk.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Volkan from Turkey. I also just like to update about the Turkey situation in geothermal market. As Thomas mentioned that Turkish geothermal investor drive European market, and as of today we almost reach 1,576 megawatt installed capacity, and end of the year, this year, we are reaching 1,600 megawatts. So also our target till 2023 is around 3,300 megawatts. So also we drive with the feed-in tariff mechanism in Turkey, as you know that. And as a Turkish Geothermal Investor Association, we would like to more collaboration with the EGEC as well. Just willing to inform you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Volkan, for this nice words. Sanjeev, back to you.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you. Certainly we can reach out to you and work out how better we can collaborate. I want to, I mean, are there any things that we think are missing from what we've kind of identified today? Do we think that, I mean, we've identified tourism as something that was kind of dropped off our agenda. Cooling wasn't stressed highly enough. Are there any other things on the world of geothermal that we haven't captured?
But I'm sure that Beata in Poland has something to report. Beata, floor is yours.
Good morning, and thank you, Philip, for giving me the floor for a while. I would also like, as the gentleman for Turkey, to emphasize the importance of cooperation and so good contacts and support from EGEC in our efforts to promote geothermal. In fact, it would be not possible to submit several proposals of huge programs related to geothermal to the recovery plan. It was possible only because of the information from EGEC. So this platform of cooperation is very important, and we would like to continue in such a way. Of course, from our side, from the country which is still based on coal, it's still extremely difficult to promote more geothermal usage, but it is quite possible also because of the arguments and the updates we have thanks to EGEC. So, as in case of Turkey, we also declare that the cooperation with EGEC even stronger than now is important, just to make more space for geothermal. This is very useful, especially the arguments and the updating us what is going on the EU level. So this is rather my comment for the time being. Thank you.
Okay, Beata, I see that Elif also came from INBV as a comment. Floor is yours. Elif, yes?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Sorry, I had an issue with my microphone earlier, so I couldn't speak. Actually, I had a question regarding the EU Green Deal call. Speaking to EU Green Deal call in terms of policy and in terms of our approaches, how to include geothermal topics more into the investment or investors' decisions. So as far as I know, in the call areas of EU Green Deal call, for example, there is not much topics of geothermal listed. For example, lithium topic. So I just wanted to ask, do we still have chance to change this topics which is listed in this EU Green Deal call, or when once we are talking about EU Green Deal call, it's like something that we would use in the future for the existing topics, or still we have the power to influence these areas, call areas? Thank you.
If you want, Sanjeev, I will answer to this question. So this Green Deal call is in the framework of Horizon 2020, is the work program for research and innovation, ending this year. So with the Horizon 2020 Green Deal call, indeed for lithium extraction from the general brines, there's not really direct opportunity, maybe some indirect, but as I agree with you, it's not really obvious. What we expect is from the work program 2021-2022, the European Commission for the new program called Horizon Europe, with the first codes published first March, April next year. We expect some codes on geothermal lithium.
Okay, thanks.
Tomorrow we have a discussion with the two chairmen of ETIP, Deep Geothermal, Fausto Batti and Javier Ochoaga, with the European Commission to discuss the content of the call. So we expect to highlight also this topic.
Thank you very much.
Sanjeev?
On the Green Deal call, yeah, I think you've covered everything. I mean, Elif, the task force that we're setting up on kind of geothermal lithium, we're going to go a lot more into the kind of the funding opportunities and also the kind of political priorities and the marketing and the promotional side of things as well. So we can deep dive into that. And you know, my colleagues will be preparing a bit more of a guidance note on the kind of the EU funding opportunities for lithium, which we'll share with the entire network. Anyway, so we can pick that up there. If I just two things on the inputs from our colleagues from Turkey and from Poland. I mean, this is kind of how we envisage working with you. We, you know, where we see something that we think is of super importance, we're going to you know, communicate that out, and it'd be, I mean, maybe what we should do is just to kind of institutionalize a more regular knowledge share between the kind of the developments, the funding opportunities, the regulatory drivers, and what's happening within the national context or the regional context. So I think maybe that's an organizational aspect. It's certainly something I think we should do, because I, from my point of view, I'd like to get a better handle of what's happening. You know, the situation in Turkey, the situation in Poland and Germany, and all of the other regions where we operate. And I think then it makes it easier for us to also look out for things that will be of relevance to you as well. So I think what I'm hearing loud and clear is that we need to have more regular conversations about developments that are happening at EU and national levels. And I think we, you know, I'll go back to Philippe and we'll work out a way in which we can do that more systematically. And Philippe, have we had any more requests to take the floor? Or?
We have a new one from Greece, Dimitrios Mendrinos. Dimitrios, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'm Dimitrios Mendrinos from the Center of Renewable Energy Sources and Saving. Given the low competitiveness of geothermal energy and the high capital costs, high risk who which deters investors. I think that the focus should be to include financing geothermal investments in the mainstream structural funds, perhaps special dedicated chapters on structural funds supporting geothermal. So this is what I want to say.
Thank you, Dimitrios. And I think it's the last one we have received as a request and comment. So Sanjeev, maybe we can come to some conclusion and next steps now.
Sorry, yes, my mic was on mute. Thank you, Dimitrios. That's a really good point, and it's one of the things that we flagged up in terms of, what are the different financial instruments that we can program into funding at the moment. The structural funds is kind of nearing towards the end of its discussions, but we know that there's the just transition mechanism, which is where a lot of kind of political buzz is around, and there's money that's been put into that, and that's to allow countries to kind of move from the kind of fossil dependency into renewable energy solutions, to energy efficiency, into kind of new technologies. So there's opportunities there, and that programming process EJEC is very actively involved in, and but in terms of actually something dedicated towards geothermal, that hasn't quite materialized yet, but certainly we will be pushing for this, as we were trying to push for dedicated funding in the resilience and recovery package. And the information that was sent, that you have sent through to us, we're kind of working with the various parts of the Commission to make sure that when they negotiate with member states, that geothermal projects are pushed further up the agenda, so that they're more likely to be agreed when those plans are to be finalised. At that same note, it's an important message to everybody. If you are able to access a draft plan, resilience and recovery plan from your member state, then please do share it with us, because it helps us give a bit of visibility, and maybe it helps us also to kind of engage with the contacts that we have within the Commission to make sure that either that there's some really good geothermal projects in there and they need to be signed off quickly, or that actually there's perhaps some missing, and we need to, we can make the connection between the information you sent us, so that the Commission can highlight this when they have their conversations and their assessments of the documents that the member states sent in. So maybe we'll ask my colleague to send a bit more of an orchestrated, detailed email, kind of with additional information about the resilience and recovery package, just to make sure that we get money. Wherever there's an opportunity, we need to make sure that we access that funding, or at least make sufficient amount of noise that it's impossible not to do so. And on that point, I mean, this has been a good, fruitful conversation. There's been a good blend of what's happening in within the kind of the EU context, the upcoming dynamics, a lot about how we're going to reorganize the work that we do within EJEC to make sure that we're able to coordinate and pull together our different activities to kind of realize the geothermal decade. And at the same time, we've had really good insights into individual member state, country specific developments. And it'd be good if we could maybe carry on this assessment of the different member states. It'd be good to hear the opportunities in Spain, in France, in Italy, some of the Nordic countries, the Baltic countries as well. So maybe we should carry on this segment of kind of giving member state developments, because I think this is important for us as a community to know what's happening in our neighbouring countries, but also if there's areas and opportunities we can learn from to kind of cross-learn from them. So I will almost definitely come back and have a fuller conversation, another discussion with the member state picture, to allow people to have a bit more time to deep dive into the opportunities and maybe some of the highlights within their countries that will be beneficial. Other than that, we've taken some really good feedback from the discussions, and we're going to incorporate them into the activities that we're going to do around the geothermal strategy. And we will stay in touch with you, because it's important to keep the dialogue and to keep the conversation going. So from my side of things, thank you very, very much for taking the time to take part and for your excellent interventions and presentations. And I'm really looking forward to working again, to know you much more intensely than we have done in the past. Philippe, that's all from my side. Do you have anything to?
Maybe what we can explain that following this brainstorming officially on Friday during the EJEC annual general meeting 2020, we approve the launch of this geothermal strategy. As mentioned by Sanjeev, it's a process and it's not a one shot, it's a process. You will see one of the first milestones is the publication of an independent study. We expect for early 2021. And all of you will be asked to contribute. We have also the need to have some financial contribution from this to finance this survey. EJEC will give some money to confund, but we will also research from sponsoring. You are also asked to contribute because we will establish a steering committee to organize a bit the study and also to follow up on the general strategy. So if you are interested, have that in mind. We launch a call for the steering committee in combination with the EJEC board members. And with that, I think Sanjeev, I do the tour. So Sanjeev will be the leader of this initiative. So any question you may have is to address to Sanjeev. And I know that the communication team and Valeria are also preparing some events to highlight that. You know that we have launched this year this concept of a geothermal decade. Starting first semester, that geothermal is more than energy, highlighting notably, you mentioned agriculture, tourism, supply of heat and power to industry, lithium for transport. But the second semester is to say geothermal is more than energy, but it's also your source of energy. And I know that there's several activities from Valeria and her team on that. So I think we can conclude on that, Sanjeev, Valeria. And we wish you a good day and hope to see many of you on Friday for the AGM. Goodbye.
Bye. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
I just see that Marco wanted to speak. Sorry, Marco. You're unmuted, Marco, in the last minute. Yes, raise your hand now. Marco Baresi, I don't know if you want to speak. I open your mic.